Okay, so welcome back to Into the Abyss. Okay, this is our section when we offer you up our reading recommendations. So, Tom, why don't you start with your reading recommendation for this segment of Into the Abyss?
Sure. Before I begin, I finished my bottle of screwballs, so I'm now on to Kraken rum.
This may or may not skew his review.
No. Actually, I have it here, and I'm sure Kevin will put it up. I am reviewing Darcy Coates' The Haunting of Ashburn House. And it's a 2018 novel. She's the USA Today best-selling author, by the way. It is, now, of course, I'm not the expert. You guys are the expert when it comes to writing and horror. I actually liked it in terms of it was an easy read. The chapters were not very big. It starts off with the young girl named Adrian who inherits a house, the Ashburn House, from a great aunt named Edith, who she believes she's never met before. And by the way, you might think, okay, you entered a house that's probably haunted, you would get out. She has no other choice. Her mother died from cancer, so that cost her a lot of money. She is a freelance writer, and unfortunately, her bills are more than what she's getting in. And she can't find an apartment that will take in this cat named Wolfgang she found off the streets. So this is kind of, I guess you would say, I say good for her that she had no home, now she has one. Now, unfortunately, of course, it also means that this house and the land surrounding it, it's on a hill above the small village of Ipsum. It's haunted, and she's dealing with what she thinks is the ghost of her great aunt that is trying to kill her. It is a very good haunted house novel, for lack of a better word. It really came off, I think Darcy Coates did a good job showing Adrian being alone in her problem and her fight with the supernatural. And I do believe, and the little negative at the end was they kind of crammed in a lot more near the end than they should have. They should have let it play out a little bit more. I do think it's a good read. It's one of those reads where if you're reading in bed late at night, you check the closet door to see if it's opened or not, just to make sure. I think it's a good novel. I think Darcy Coates is a great writer, Australian writer, by the way, but I think that's one of her big things is her big novel is a young woman who is being threatened by the supernatural, and she, really just can't get out of it. Her financial situation means she can't get out of the situation she's in. It is, now, funny thing we brought this up because we talked before about horror versus thriller. Now, do you guys remember back when we did Invisible Woman at the AMC before the lockdown?
Yep.
And I went to Barnes & Noble before I came to the movie theater. Chuck, you did too.
I was there as well.
And yeah, this was one of the books that I grabbed before I came to the movie theater. It was at the front of the Barnes & Noble in what was called Creme de la Crime. I think they were kind of putting it in the thriller section just to sell more of it because they're afraid of if I sell this as a horror, it's not going to get as many purchases. Kind of a silly situation. There are many horror fans out there, and I think people need to take advantage of it. But yes, Darcy Coates, The Haunting of Ashburn House. I like it. It's a very good read. It's very updated, so give it a shot.
Chuck, what are your reading recommendations for this
I'll
section?
let you go first, Kevin. You go
Okay.
first there before you second.
So I've got three sections, and the pattern that I developed is I want to offer two currents and then one classic. So the two currents that I'm going to offer is the first one, and again I'll put the big picture up, is Eden. And of course my video has everything backward. But Eden by Tim Lebbon. Tim Lebbon is a horror writer. He lives in England. Who I read a lot of his early Dorchester novels, and I just absolutely loved them. And I don't know why he stopped writing. When Dorchester fell apart, he moved on to bigger and better pastures. I kind of didn't follow him after that for no particular reason. If you've watched The Silence on Netflix, That's based on Tim Lebbon's novel, The Silence.
Which is a good book, by the way.
Yeah. His new novel, Eden, is eco thriller horror, which he did a great job in a horror novel called The Nature of Balance, where nature basically says, screw you, I'm fighting back. Okay. This one is a great novel because, Tom, this is right on that dividing line of what you were talking about as far as thriller versus horror. It's marketed as a thriller. So basically, in the near future, because Earth has been so devastated by pollution and the way we've destroyed the land, the world has decided to erect what they call virgin zones. These are areas around the world where they've evacuated humans and said, we are going to let nature retake these areas. It's kind of like a desperate bid to let Earth start to try to repair itself. So across the globe, humans are evacuated, and these places are guarded, and humans are not allowed to enter, because we're just going to let nature reclaim these areas, and hopefully Earth can start to kind of repair itself. Of course, humans are stubborn and curious. So over the years, there's an underground extreme sport, which is kind of interesting because Tim Lebbon is not into extreme sports, but he's into biking. He's into running. I don't know if he's into mountain climbing. I almost want to say he is. But it's funny to see that part of his persona reflected in this novel. But there's over the years, an extreme sport develops where these underground teams of athletes, runners, mountain climbers, biologists will sneak into the virgin zones, and their goal is to get across them as fast as they can. You know, it's all underground, it's all illegal. But even though they know they're trespassing, like these virgin zones are guarded by armed guards, even though they're trespassing, they still don't want to violate the integrity of the virgin zones, so they take very little with them. They take very little supplies, very little in the way of weapons. Their goal is, you know, as with most people who engage with extreme sports, the challenge of getting across this virgin, untouched land. But there's been rumors circulating that in these virgin lands, something strange is happening. That when you let nature reclaim an area, something very alien has grown. And we have the story of one team with Dylan and his daughter Jen. They are part of a team that has gone through many different virgin zones, and now they're going to tackle the toughest one of all. It's called Eden. And of course, Dylan also has a subplot. Dylan's wife left him many years before. He's not sure why. And Kat is holding the secret that she was part of the decision process to say we should go to Eden. What she doesn't tell everyone until they get in there is that she knows that her mom has taken a team in there before them. And when they get into Eden, they find that nature has not only retaken the land, but something very strange has grown in its place. And this is where it straddles the line of thriller and horror, because the idea that nature is a force, is maybe a sentient force that doesn't like humanity very much. It really verges on that idea of cosmic horror. You know, there's no Lovecraftian elements here or anything like that. But that idea of coming up against this force that's alien to us, very different from us, that's regularly edging on there in cosmic horror. And it's a really wonderful novel. It's very fast-paced. I don't want to give away any more. I do want to say, though, I don't know if either of you have seen the movie Annihilation.
Yes. Excellent. Very good.
Annihilation is one of the few science fiction movies that I feel like, I'm sorry, This is science fiction / horror. Some of those images in Annihilation were so horrific, but at the same time, they were...
The sound of that bear was just haunting.
Right. So in Eden, Tim Lebbon, this is why, and this may be marketed as thriller, but I'm sorry, there's some... What they find are the remains of other teams that have tried to get through Eden. And when you see the way that nature has consumed those remains, all I can think of is Annihilation. It's so powerful. So I definitely go pick up Eden by Tim Lebbon.
And Kevin, I have not read Eden, but I have read other works by Tim Lebbon. He's great at the science fiction horror. He's great at the monster horror. He's a master of that genre.
Tim Lebbon is also a wordsmith. And again, I'm not exactly sure why after he left Dorchester I stopped reading him. I mean, there's so many books, but this right here is like, okay, I need to get back to reading Tim Lebbon. The next novel I have is Fishing by P. Gardner Goldsmith. Now, clarification, or what do they call that? Like where I'm Gard and I have known each other for many years. Gard and I both went to Borderlands boot camp, writers boot camp. We're friends. You know, we are fellow Twilight Zone and aficionados. So just so you know that before I go into this review. And I also know that Gard is going to be a future guest of the show because I know he wants to come to Binghamton someday. So when we get past social distancing, Gard will be a guest in the show. Fishing is this really psychedelic, surreal story. It's split into two narratives. The one narrative is during the 60s. These two girls, who are lovers, are trying to escape an abusive... The one girl is trying to escape an abusive relationship with her father. The other girl is trying to help her escape. And unfortunately, in their escape, they kind of fall in the sway of a cult leader, commune leader, you know, in their flight. And the second narrative is a little bit later in the 70s when a unnamed person has escaped. A first-person narrator has escaped from a prison transport and is making their way through the woods and killing people along the way to try to get back to where this commune used to be. And it's a really masterful story. Like I said, I wrote a review for this for Cemetery Dance Publications. Will come out later. And I said that this was Charles Beaumont and Rod Serling by way of Richard Lehman. Because there's some really intricate plotting here. Gard does not take you anywhere where you expect. You think you know where the story's going, and you do not end up there. And then the ending of the book is very thoughtful, very suspenseful. Gard is very much a libertarian, and Gard knows more about the government and the Constitution than I know about in my little... He knows more about that in his little finger than I know in my whole body. So it's a very thoughtful book when you're talking about the government and rights and things like that. And suddenly you get to this visceral horror ending where you're like, what? So, again, Fishing by P. Gardner Goldsmith, highly recommend it. My final is my classic, because that's what I think is the... What's that?
Sorry. Nothing. Go ahead, Kevin.
Okay. Tom has apparently already had too much rum. This is what I want to do is I want to do two contemporaries and two classics. My final is The Howling Man by Charles Beaumont. Now, this is the second time I've read through this. Many of you probably have no idea who Charles Beaumont is. But if you've watched The Twilight Zone, if you've seen the episode with Talkie Tina, if you've seen the episode The Howling Man, If you've seen the episode Perchance to Dream, or the guy is having these waking dreams about this girl named Maya who's trying to kill him in his dreams, then you know Charles Beaumont. Charles Beaumont is a writer who found his claim to fame during the Twilight Zone run. He tragically, I can't remember what it was. I don't know if it was ALS, but he tragically died very young. We're talking late 30s. It is my belief that if Charles Beaumont had lived, he would be just as popular as Ray Bradbury. His work resides in this, like he was the perfect Twilight Zone writer, because it was a little weird, it was strange, it was slightly supernatural, but you couldn't call it horror or a time travel story. It was in that space that very few writers have occupied. And it's just such wonderful work. Now, here's the thing. The Howling Man you can only get used. The Hunger and Other Stories you can get as an ebook. It's a reprint, it's an ebook. You can get it as that. It doesn't have all of these stories in it, but if you can find the Howling Man in paperback, or find The Hunger by Charles Beaumont, I would highly recommend it. Chuck, why don't you end us off?
Okay, so I took a experimental run this month. I wanted to try something new. Went with a kind of an unknown author. It's Kevin Luckia or Lucia. I'm not sure how to pronounce it. So,
I think it's Lachaya.
Lachaya, yes, the Kevin Lachaya, Mystery Road. I read it because it was short. I thought it'd be good to read.
I read it because it was short. He didn't use big words.
Yeah. So I read this. It's reminiscent of classic Twilight Zone episodes. Kevin mentioned Charles Beaumont. I had a lot of feel for that. Maybe not Talking Tina, but more of the emotional episodes of Twilight Zone, where there's that longing of the past and not sure what's going on in the cosmic world. That has us here. So, and I will say the raw sexuality of it was very.
There's no sex.
Kevin's laughing because that's not what it is. No, it definitely. If you like classic Twilight Zone, this is your cup of tea right here. I had a great vibe of the generational aspects and the blending of the past with the impacts of motion today. It goes down that avenue that not a lot of horror authors go, but it has that strong emotional connection of seeing the bigger world. It's almost a coming of age tale, but it doesn't focus in not so much on the actual coming of age, but more of the protagonist as a young explore the world, kind of seeing the world in the bigger picture. That moment where you start to see your parents in the older generations and start to see them as full adults and as full human beings, rather than seeing them as figureheads of your childhood, and you're seeing them for the first time and starting to understand older generations for the first time. That's where this novel takes place. I highly recommend it. It's a good emotional journey. Yes.
It's Kevin Lachai, I think.
Kevin Lachai. Thank you for looking that up. I should have Google searched this beforehand. But I figured I'd take a chance on it. It's published by Cemetery Dance, who's published some pretty good authors. So I thought, hey, why not? We'll take a stab at it this month, and we'll try this no-name author. I think this author has some promise. I think they've got some good things ahead of them, and I look forward to reading more from him or her. Him or her, I'm not sure. That it could be a her. I'm not sure. I didn't look too much into it, but yes, Mystery Road, Cemetery Dance.
How does it feel, Kevin?
All right, well, There you go. There's your reading recommendations. From Into the Abyss.